Welcome to the Fandom Outpost, your podcast for all things pop culture.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fandom Outpost. If this is your first time or return time, whether you watch us on YouTube or follow us on our podcast, thanks for checking in. As always, I'm 130, your host. I am Mark.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Bob.
Today's episode is a director's spotlight, one of Bob's favorites. So Bob is going to take us through the films, or some films, of William Friedkin.
William Friedkin, quite a director that has made some movies that I know many people know of. I mean, there's The Exorcist and The French Connection are kind of the two big film titles that most people probably hear if you're interested in any type of movie history. We'll probably get into those the most. To Live and Die in LA was a movie that came out when three of us worked at the theater back in the mid 80s. It's kind of our stomping grounds, the movie theater. So I thought this would be a good topic.
To Live and Die in LA is a weird one because that seems like the first time Friedkin utilized pop music, if that's the right way to say it, into one of his movies. When rewatching his films, they're not set to a soundtrack. You know, his movies are more
like one group,
atmospheric. Yeah. So
let's go back a little bit. We'll go back a little bit to the beginning. I know he was born in Chicago. There was an interesting podcast out with a 2.5 hour long interview with him that is way more in depth than we can get into, but we're just kind of touching on things that we enjoyed from his career and filmography. But that interview sheds a lot of light on what brought him to be a director. And it was basically storytelling, I think, is what his main. He wanted to tell a story somehow. And I think if you see his movies, there's the story does kind of come through the strongest. That and kind of his anti-heroes and maybe flawed characters are another theme.
Yes. Yep. That's what I would say.
And it started out early on. I mean, I haven't seen every movie of his in the past, but I did brush up on a few this week to kind of fill in some gaps.
Right.
French Connection I had seen years ago, and so I watched that on Blu-ray. And I don't want to get into all the dirty details of the censorship on streaming and all.
I do. I'm going to call you on that because that I did not know that until you started talking about it. And then we watched that scene, and
that is interesting.
And it even made it more confusing because of what you said comes right after that. So the fact that somebody chose to censor that particular part, but not censor something later, is just extremely interesting to me.
It's an interesting thing. Three of us talked about it a few days ago, just the idea of the censorship, and we could kind of briefly touch on that one because I know that was his first really big, hit, won some Oscars, and
put him on the map, right? As far as a feature film director.
1971, and it's a gritty 71. It's a gritty film. And seeing it again, it's like it is pretty darn gritty, and it looks like it's almost a documentary. It's shot very on the run.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that because of that interview. He explained a little bit about how he got into filmmaking through documentary.
Yeah.
And when I was kind of going back over French Connection, you could really see that kind of handheld visceralness come through, and that did have a documentary look to it.
I mean, it's known mainly for its car chase, which, I'm watching it again. I was like, oh, here comes a car chase. And I had forgotten it's not a car versus a car. It's a car. He's chasing a subway train, one of those raised platform trains.
So he's driving underneath the elevated train cars.
Yeah, in New York. And it is a fantastic scene, but I'd like to hear, I'd like to hear what you guys think, because there's another chase scene in To Live and Die in LA that almost tops that one, because that one's crazy.
And that's, I guess I get the sense that it's kind of filmed the same way. So Jim, you had said something about documentary style or handheld style.
Right.
It's funny when you watch some of his character driven pieces, it's all set up shot, really cool. You know, I got this, here's the angle. But when it comes to movement with him, he wants you like, this is how I say it. He wants you like you're hanging onto the hood of the car.
Right.
That's his style, or I feel that's his style as far as action comes to. You know what I mean? It's all frenetic. And I love that term, that frenetic action. Not that would give way to the much later years of the quick cuts, not like that. You know what I mean? Just that frenetic action where you're like, oh my God. And you realize maybe after 5 minutes you've been holding your breath, you know, because that car is going to turn a corner somewhere and it's going to smash. And then you're going to be like, oh, like that. You know, that's kind of how I felt. And then when you mentioned To Live and Die in LA, it's the same way. Those two car chase scenes. But
I laugh when I think of that scene because when they start going the opposite direction on the freeway, it's just unbelievable. I mean,
yeah, dude, I can't even imagine that. So
in the French Connection, the story is that they didn't have a permit to do that, and legendary stuntman Hal Needham was driving the car, and Friedkin was sitting in the back with the camera. He was the cameraman, and they drove 90 blocks. I guess like that. So supposedly the accident that happens in it midway actually happened, which I kind of find real weird, hard to believe. And they kept it going, and it's like, how do you not get sued out of existence for that, right?
I know. It was a different time.
Yeah, I was going to say I can't help but love, and I would call that. For those who are going to watch our John Carpenter director's podcast, that guerrilla filmmaking.
Yes.
Where it's just like, maybe they looked around, you know, and they were like, okay, there's nobody around, go. You know, like that, what can we do on a budget? And more so, oh my God, we didn't even have permission to do that. Let's just go ahead and do that. I mean, probably in some darkened room somewhere, I imagine they're all laid it out with Matchbox cars and said, this is what we're going to do, you know, and
you would think so.
We're just going to let it run. Go ahead.
It's funny they asked him on that interview, what do you think of digital effects nowadays? And he's like, oh yeah, they're great. I mean, you could do all that in a computer now that I had to do with the camera on the street. So he's for technology. He's not one of those that are stuck with the past was this and that. You know, he seemed to be very hip with technology and things looking as good as they can on screen, which was a pretty cool thing, I thought. For, you know, he's up there in age. I think he's like 88, so he's up there.
When you look at those movies of the 70s, and they really did come out of the 70s, okay, you get a lot of those type of movies where it's like, holy cow. So when you're in that car chase, or like Bullet, you guys ever see Bullet?
Yeah,
with
that's
Steve
another
McQueen?
Yeah.
That's a
so
great
like
one.
When you get in there with those guys, like you, I don't know, you just get that whole, wow, I'm in the car. Like it's not, you know,
right, it's very visceral.
And I can't help but wonder, instead of paying attention to the driving all the time, I'm always looking at the bystanders. Like, holy shit, that dude almost got hit.
Yeah,
What
right.
is his story? You know, that dude had to dive out the way. And when you talk about Friedkin and his chase scene, and if nobody knew, is there anybody like that in there where it's like, oh my God, he hit the cardboard boxes and crap and all that, and you know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
Right.
It's like, what's going on? I also want to mention another one really quick because his partner in the French Connection is
one of our favorite actors, right?
Chief Brody. Yeah. But I don't know if you guys ever see this. Let me give you some homework. You ever see a movie called The 7 Ups?
Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. You watch that, you will. So you know how we talk about kind of To Live and Die in L.A. being like a spiritual successor to another movie that we like.
Right.
So go watch The 7 Ups. You'll consider it a spiritual successor to The French Connection, hands down. So, and it's car chase scenes. It's elite, you know, New York cops and stuff of the 70s. And it's all that gritty crap. And But I really like it. It's a good movie. I got to recommend it to you.
I don't know if we fully closed the loop on that censorship thing. Let's just lay it out real quick and close that loop. It was basically a racial slur that Popeye Doyle, who's played by Gene Hackman, who's a fantastic, legendary actor, with Roy Scheider. Scheider is injured in a shakedown with him in a prior scene with an African-American suspect who pulls a knife and cuts Scheider on the arm. They go back after they apprehend him. They're at the station, kind of getting cleaned up, ready to go out for the night. And Scheider comes up to him and basically says, I'm sorry, I got cut or whatever. And Hackman makes a derogatory comment about an African-American guy and using a racial slur. And in the streaming cut that's streamed on the Criterion Channel, Vudu, wherever, I believe, it cuts right to them. Right when Scheider walks in, it cuts right to them leaving. Okay, we're going to go get a drink. I owe you a drink. So it kind of cuts that whole scene out. So it's a weird issue with censorship, and where does it end or where does it begin?
And the point of that
Right.
is to show that he's a flawed character. I mean, he's an anti-hero, so he's not all good, he's not all bad, and it's not to say like, oh, the hero of our movie is racist. That's not the point of that character, but it's also, this is a person in that time period in that job, maybe using that term. It's not correct, but that's what that guy is, right?
It's meant to have you elicit a feeling toward that character, like, oh, this
Right.
guy is like,
You're like, oh, here's my hero. Oh, wait a minute, why is he acting like that? I'm not cool with that, And he's a very driven character.
Right. The more important question is that should somebody, and this is for another time, should somebody go to the director and say, we want to make this cut? And should the director approve that?
right.
What do you guys think about that? Should that be done or not?
I mean, we could probably do a whole episode on that topic, probably.
Yeah,
So,
it's an episode on censorship and
right.
Yeah. Stay tuned for the episode on censorship.
Yeah. Let's move on to some of his
All
other
right.
movies, because I know we got a lot to touch
I
on in
know,
a short
I know.
time.
yes.
Right after the heels of French Connection comes The Exorcist, which is some consider maybe the greatest horror movie ever made. I would probably tend to agree with that. That still scares the crap out of me. And I have a hard time watching that in the dark by myself during Halloween time. That one will get me. It's just
Father
a
Marin,
creepy-
flawed character.
Yep. Yeah,
You
there
know,
you go
right?
again.
so
Absolutely.
there you go again,
Yeah.
flawed character. Can't think of the other priest's name, but he's kind of a flawed character as well. So it's two
Yeah,
flawed priests
absolutely.
who aren't really
Yeah.
sure of what their
Damien.
faith is and
Yeah,
and
Father
what to
Damien.
go about it. Father Damien, you're right. Damien Karras. Oh wow, that
Karras,
just
there
crossed
you go.
out. Yeah, Karras. So, yeah. Yeah, our friend Todd, by the way, for years, guys, growing up, he echoed your statement, Bob. He was like, I can't watch it in the dark. And I was like, really? Like, I never understood it. But the more I've watched over the years, the more I've realized if you go from beginning to end, yeah, it's you got to watch it like that. You just can't come in with the head spin and the puke.
No.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You're going to come
It's
out of
a build.
context. You got to watch it for the build up. Yeah, you really have to and stuff. But
The sound design.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to say, yep. Legendary, who's it, Jim?
Well, we had Dick Smith as the makeup artist
Yeah,
with
that's
his
right, Dick
assistant.
Smith.
Rick Baker was his young assistant
Wow.
on that film. So
Yep.
That's way back. 70,
Yeah.
73, yeah.
Yep.
So,
So,
yeah, I consider that one of my top favorites. Every year I got to at least watch that.
and I always say this every time we talk about this stuff. I would say The Exorcist falls in line with probably almost a perfect film.
Yeah, it's
Like-
going to be in that group.
Yeah, it's in that group. It'd be a hard discussion for those debaters to talk about, to take away from, because it's almost perfect. Have you seen the spider crawl scene down the stairs?
yeah, and it's cut for a reason.
Yeah, it works better if it's not in there. So that was
It's
a
too
good
much.
decision to take that
It's
out.
too much. It's too much.
Yeah,
It
so
didn't work exactly correctly, and then it's just too much.
Yep. Yeah, that build up's
Because
great.
at that point you'd be out of the house, right? Once that happens, your daughter would be in an asylum, right?
What was that, Saturday Night
What?
Live?
That's your daughter? See ya.
That Richard Pryor, remember?
Yeah.
Saturday Night
Yeah,
Live.
it's like, all right, I'm out.
Oh my God, get out. Bye.
But
Yeah.
Exorcist
Oh
is
my
one of
God.
those movies that it doesn't feel like it has any fat on it.
No?
You know, you're kind of watching it and you're waiting for it to get to where it's going, but there's a reason it's taking that long to get there.
There you go. Yep. Yeah. And it also, I don't think, with the exception of outside shots for the few that they're talking to other characters and you see cars, it ages very well. Like it doesn't age poorly. It doesn't feel like it's set in the 70s. I mean, it could be today. Like I said, visually though, like, oh, look at that Studebaker, whatever it is. I don't know, but like, okay, you can see the times and stuff like that and the flare bottom pants. But as far as the story goes and stuff, it's amazing. It could be done today.
Also, visually, stylistically, it's quite a departure from the French Connection. It doesn't have that documentary look or that kinetic energy to it. So, until the action scenes that it needs it. So,
yeah, the only time that it's kinetic is when the bed is kind of jumping around and
In the
he's
room,
kind of
it's going nuts.
in the room and stuff. But other than that, it's pretty, it's good standard sets. And the use of, my favorite thing about that movie is the breath coming out of those guys' mouth.
It must have been cold in that
little
set.
tiny subtle detail things, right? Like that.
Right.
Lighting, yeah.
Lighting.
Anybody want to talk about Sorcerer? Because I got nothing on that.
I watched it last night. Did you watch it yet?
Oh man, I'm behind.
I did. I watched it last night.
I watched it a few weeks ago. Did you catch it on digital or something?
I actually rented it on Amazon. It was on there. You pointed us to the Wages of Fear, that it's like a remake of.
The French film inspired by, a remake, I don't know what you want to call it.
Right. He says, Friedkin says inspired by. Other people, critics said, why would you remake this classic film? That was one of its problems. But it's, it takes half the movie to kind of set up to where it's going, and then the other half of the movie you're going. It's a long setup, but...
And who does it star?
Oh, Roy Scheider is the American star of the film, and he's really interesting to watch. He's very... If you've ever seen Treasure of the Sierra Madre with Humphrey Bogart, he's very much that type of character.
I think that had Scheider not been the age that he was going into the 80s and what was happening with film and stuff like that, I think he could have been a muse for Friedkin. Like they could have continued a really good relationship to go on, but I don't know what happened after that.
The beginning of the film sets up 4 protagonists that each have take a wrong path that makes them have to reason to leave town or leave wherever they're from, and they all wind up in South America working for peanuts in destitute living situations, working for a mining company in a third world Latin American country.
The thing that is I want to tie back into Friedkin is that he also deals with fate. And I love that concept in a movie. And even in a horror movie like a Halloween or something, that's kind of overtly stated about fate.
The name of the film should have been Fate, or something to do with fate. The name Sorcerer is horrible.
Yeah, to this day, people are like, where did that come from?
And it's from I think it's the name of the truck that because they're all named Memphis Belle kind of thing.
Yeah, they write Sorcerer on one of the trucks in Spanish or something, or French. It's on there.
Right.
But one of the trucks, looks like it has a face.
Yeah, the one on the bridge, which is like the key scene, special effects scene.
For years, flipping through soundtracks, I'm always, here's the Sorcerer, and it's this truck on the bridge with the guy, and it has a very iconic image, and it's by Tangerine Dream.
Tangerine Dream, there you go. I'm sure we're going to talk about them more later on, but
yeah, and we have them to, we have Friedkin to thank for getting them into the, film. So, but it's really good. It's a very good movie. It's back to that documentary Jocelyn handheld kind of filmmaking where it's kind of anxiety ridden because their purpose is the mining company, there's one of the rigs exploded elsewhere, and they pick 4 guys to transport this really old dynamite that's degrading into nitroglycerin across the jungle, so that they can blow up the refinery that's on fire and cap it. And then that's the second half of the film.
Okay.
And it's really good.
It's really good. So fate plays a big role with all the characters.
I was gonna say fate. If you, yeah,
It's kind of got an ambiguous ending, kind of, sort of.
You know, French Connection, I forgot, has an ambiguous ending. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
problem is that somebody made the French Connection Part 2
that answered that question. Yeah.
to answer that question. So
to spoil it, you hear him run off into the warehouse, and he turns the corner looking for the bad guy, and you hear a gun go off, and that's the end. But then they have what they're all doing now.
Yes.
Pre-credit thing, and like the bad guy got away, and Popeye and Cloudy get demoted to a different assignment or something.
Right.
So you're like, well, he got away. What happened with the gunshot?
So it answered the question, but yeah.
Well, I think in Part 2 he actually goes to France to follow up on the smuggling operation or whatever.
Right.
So
and that's a John Frankenheimer movie. Is Part 2.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Frankenheimer either. He's all right. The fourth one that Friedkin did that was probably influential, which is, I would say, the last time he had a real strong influential one was I get the date wrong.
85. Yep.
85. Yeah. So it's funny because if the poster, which you can see behind Bob there, if you're on YouTube, it says, and I can remember this quote for quote, the director of the French Connection is back on the street again.
That was kind of the selling point, right?
Yeah. They hyped a lot of the chase scene from that movie in promos.
Mm-hmm. It's on the LA freeway. Yeah.
And it was kind of Friedkin's return to form. That's what you get from that movie, you know. And to give you a basic, if you guys don't mind, it's two Secret Service agents who pursue a counterfeiter. And I guess it's gritty. I mean, is that a word that I would use? It's gritty.
Another good cast.
Strong cast, yeah. Willem Dafoe, early Willem Dafoe.
That's the counterfeiter, yeah. Rick Masters.
Chinese character on the building. I don't know if did that predate Streets of Fire, because that might have been his first.
No, Streets of Fire came before that.
Yeah, probably a year or two earlier, 82, 3, something like that.
Yeah, but he still looked weirdly Joker-esque Green Goblin Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, he had a creepy vibe going with him, doesn't he?
Well, when he became an older character actor, like, you know, in the original John Wick and stuff, he's got that grizzled, I could have been this, I could have been that, and you believe whatever he's doing, you know. So, but the younger version is just scary. Like, Willem Dafoe's a scary character.
He's just like a guy you don't want to be around.
He always kind of has that wound spring kind of walk-in intensity where you're not sure how they're going to pop, you know. It's like a jack-in-the-box every time you're talking to him.
Yeah, there's a couple scenes in there like that, and that's he has to go get his money back from a couple of hoods that he fronted some stuff with, and it's like a really tight fight in an apartment. Don't! You know? Yeah, we could quote lines from that movie, but I can't do it. We probably don't have time for that stuff. And it has an incredible top 10 chase scene on, like Bob said, the Los Angeles freeway. Oh, and talk about fate. All these movies, like you said, even this one has got fate written all over it. Like, it's heavy, it's thick with fate, you know? And dare I say it's got a twist ending as well.
Yeah, and not as ambiguous, but surprising, and you didn't expect it kind of thing.
No. I know To Live and Die in LA for us came out at a time when we were at the theater, and we were, as young, influential, wannabe filmmakers someday. I know all of us we saw these particular movies, and each different one strikes a certain chord. And this has been one that Bob has carried a torch for years. You always go back to this one, and I don't know what it is with you, Bob, but like you've always been, you know, really this and Manhunter, which we're going to have to get around to one day when we talk about
Michael Mann will be a topic later. But
this is always one that you've continually referenced. And
I don't know why. It's always stuck with me. It's the music, the soundtrack we mentioned.
Like a Venn diagram of like movies of that time intersect with things like Miami Vice and
Mm-hmm.
Live and Die in L.A. and then Michael Mann, and it all kind of turns into
Yeah.
this movie.
Yeah, you're right, dude. Once that MTV hit, that's a whole nother thing. But the problem with MTV, that's that quick cut thing. So Miami Vice fits perfectly into that. But To Live and Die in LA, in the 80s genre, it doesn't work because it was moving into the quote Miami Vice era of, the quick cuts, camera movements and stuff, where To Live and Die in LA still was gritty. It still was story driven, character driven, you know, uh, the chase at the airport. God, I was out of breath every time I watched that part.
I always think of that music too. Yeah, when I think of that.
Yeah, and we are going to be talking about soundtracks. I think that's going to be our next podcast. But soundtrack by oh my god, I just drew a blank.
Wang Chung.
Wang Chung. Yeah.
I caught a couple other ones real quick. Just briefly, I saw Cruising. I found it on a streaming app with Al Pacino, which was a pretty rough topic. He's an undercover agent, police officer, cruising the gay bars of the early 80s to find a serial killer. Right. That is a interesting movie. It was protested heavily, so you'll notice there's a lot of audio replacement dialogue, because I kept going, why is this all replaced? Like, it sounded very dubbed, but I guess there was a lot of protesting going on by the gay community, and it had to get redone with the ADR. Wow. And that has an ambiguous ending too. So I'm like, oh my god, he kills me. I do love that kind of stuff. That you have to think about yourself and kind of put it together in your head what you think's going to happen. But it has one of those.
And the genesis of that story is based on a true story, because there was the radiologist, who was a guy in the background in The Exorcist, turned out to be a serial killer in real life, who was going around gay bars and killing people.
Yeah, that's.
And he saw that in a newspaper. He's like, "Why do I know this guy's face?" And he figured it out. And he said in that interview that Bob had let us in on, he had gone to this guy's lawyer and said, "Can I talk to this guy? Because I want to know what happened and why." And he said, "Yeah." So set up a meeting and he explained it. And the guy was like, "I remember the first one, but I don't remember the other ones." And it's really
oh my god.
Yeah, the other one I caught, just to kind of fill in real quick a gap, is Jade with
I never liked that one.
David Caruso.
Yeah, I was not a fan of that one.
It had a car chase, which I was like, oh my god! It was in the streets of San Francisco. Another car chase. It was a pretty prolonged one too.
There you go. There's a TV show.
Yeah, there's a throwback. But another one with a weird ending. Linda Fiorentino. Chaz Palminteri. They had a pretty interesting cast. Michael Biehn, your buddy, your new best friend.
New best friend.
New friend of the pod, Michael Biehn. Who doesn't know he's a friend of the pod yet?
Michael Biehn, yeah. You know what? I'll make it my life's goal to land that guy one day on here. So There we go.
And the last point I'd like to make is that his films are damn hard to find.
Yeah.
You really got to scour. I mean, some of these, like Jade, is out of print. Like, I was looking it up, and it's like $80, $150 to get the Blu-ray of that thing. So you got to really scour these, like Plutos and Tubies and free streaming apps to see if you can dig anything up. I found a couple, but it is hard.
I searched years for a copy of To Live and Die in LA and still can't find one.
Comes out Tuesday.
I think William Friedkin is overlooked. He's gonna go away. And his latter half of his career is going to define him. The beginning ones, you're going to be like, oh, he did that one? That's how he's going to be, because he didn't really have this stellar career that a lot of these other directors had that were doing similar type stuff, But who can say that they made The French Connection, then turned around and made, the number one horror movie of all time, stuff like that. I mean, that's, that's apples and oranges there. But he's just not going to get the love. That's why I'm glad that Bob here wanted to do a little spotlight on him, because I think that's something that should be done with all these great directors that aren't as well known as your Spielbergs or whoever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I thought we all knew enough about his filmography to piece it together, because, like you say, everyone is familiar with his works. They just maybe not put it together that it's him behind it.
About it.
All right, well, let's wrap it up. Follow us at the Fandom Outpost on social media and everywhere you get your podcasts. Jim, do you have any final words?
No, I did find out that the titular truck that's on the bridge that you'll see in all the photos, most of them, there were two trucks. The one that looks like it has a face seemed like it was called Pazuzu, which is the name of the demon from Exorcist. So
nice. I forgot
if
about
you,
that.
if you look
Yeah,
at the if you
wow.
look at the if you look at the cat, there's a crew shirt that you can buy online, and it's like this kind of very stylized graphic of this truck that looks like it has a face, and that it looks kind of like Pazuzu. So
Wow, that's great.
that's all I got, guys.
All right, guys, thanks for that. Yep.
That's all I got.
So we'll catch you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.